Please turn on your microphone and the camera to test whether it works properly and change the username into the form of team code and your last name. And for Judge, please change your name to Judge and your name. Thank you.
Mic test, am I audible? Yep.
Mic test, mic test. I forgot to bring my mic, so this is my AirPods. It's okay.
Well, since everyone is here, let's choose heads or tails, please. Please choose heads or tails.
We did.
Well, it's heads. And the winner can choose pro or con, or choose your speak order.
Sorry, give me a sec. I'm opening our case. Okay.
Well, if you guys have no questions, judges, you're in charge now.
Did you already take the draw? Can you please Stanley, kind of, because I haven't received that, can you please host, can you please just private message me? That's the kind of speaking order and the speaker's name. Thanks. Thank you. I'm ready. If you guys are ready, can just start. I'm not sure about the other judges. I think they're ready, but I'm not sure.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
All right. So seeing that everyone is ready, I'll begin my constructive speech. Time starts Now, we negate the resolution juveniles who commit violent crimes should not be treated as adults in the criminal justice system. We advocate for the abolition of the criminal justice system. This means that we're not defending the juvenile system, but voting pro is the wrong way to go. Our framework today is the injustice of the state and the quote-unquote criminal justice system. As the actor in today's resolution calling for policy action is the criminal justice system, the affirmative is first obligated to justify the existence of the criminal justice system in order to affirm. We tell you that the system is never justified from the beginning. As VTEL 17 writes, policing is fundamentally designed to manage the poor and racialized body on behalf of a system of political oppression. It is not designed for public safety or to control crimes. This is demonstrated in the juvenile delinquency sector. Sentencing Project 16 concluded that in their study nationwide, African American juveniles were 4 times more likely to be committed as were white juveniles. This is because racial minorities have been historically oppressed and are systematically disadvantaged economically and are therefore more vulnerable to crimes. The Center for American Progress 18 finds that the median wealth for Black households were less than 1/10 of that of similarly situated white households. The capitalist criminal justice system hence punishes those who do not deserve punishments. As Ryman 87 pointed out, criminals either do not deserve the punishment because their acts are caused by limited and unstable opportunities to satisfy their needs and desires, or their reactions against conditions which are themselves criminal. This is proven by the fact that in the status quo, insurrections, rioting, and revolutionary activities are defined as violent crimes, where the state is always presumed just. According to Marshall Project 21, the just alternative requires violent revolution because nonviolence means hiding the state's privilege to use much greater violence and perpetuating the violent state apparatus. According to Gelderloos 15, who writes that nonviolence is an attempt to resolve these things in our society that appear to be violent. Hence, nonviolent groups will tend to focus on eliminating or discouraging the forms of violence that are more obvious. This means that nonviolence will prioritize resistance against open war, against dictatorships, against military rule, while downplaying even cozying up to less visible violence of democratic governments, capitalism, and social warfare. Many proponents of nonviolence denounce any combative form of rebellion while normalizing or even justifying the repressive response of the state. Under pro, this will be suppressed because violent so-called criminals will only receive harsher sentences. As an alternative, we should direct effort to a community-based response to violent crimes. New York Times 20 explained that money should be shifted to programs related to mental health, housing, and education, and creation of an entire new system of public safety, as has happened in Minneapolis, where city council pledged so, saying the current policing system cannot be reformed. More importantly, discussion of abolition in academic spaces like debates empowers scholars and educators to mobilize an abolition praxis. This is the only ethical response to the dominant logic of the state. Rodriguez 10 explained that this framework compels students and teachers to question how deeply engaged they are in the violent common sense of the prison and the racist state. The abolitionist debater can prioritize a rigorous and vigorous critique of the endemic complicities of reformism to the reproduction of the racist state violence and proto-genocide. In this activity space, the role of the ballot is to promote discourse. By discussing this unique approach, we shine awareness on a perspective that most debaters are never going to research. With that, we would like to continue with our examples on how nonviolence fails. The Amnesty International 20 continues that in an authoritarian state, nonviolence will fail because of advanced governmental surveillance technologies. In Russia, facial recognition technology enables the widespread collection of sensitive personal data without reasonable suspicion. In the hands of Russia's already very abusive authorities, and in the total absence of transparency and accountability of such system, it is a tool which is likely to take reprisals against peaceful protests to an entirely new level. So just to summarize, we critique the resolution because they presume that the criminal justice system is just, and it is not just, as we have proved to you. And secondly, we tell you that these quote-unquote violent criminals of juvenile delinquencies are not necessarily criminals. They may be just rebelling against the criminal status quo, and they're actually fighting for justice. With that, we have never been so proud to negate. Thank you.
Just let me get my timer. Here. So if Judge and Ponce are ready, then my time starts now. As probably affirmed, starting off with definitions, according to Oxford English Dictionary, a juvenile is a person below 18 at which ordinary criminal prosecution is possible. According to FBI 10, violent crime is composed of 4 offenses: murder, non-negligent manslaughter, forcible rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. According to Code 13, the criminal justice system, or CJS, is comprised of multiple interrelated pillars consisting of academia, law enforcement, forensic services, the judiciary, and corrections. According to OER services, punishment, i.e. the correction pillar of the CJS, has 5 recognized purposes: deterrence, incapacitation, rehabilitation, retribution, and restitution. We thus present a framework under which the site that fulfills the most purposes of CJS wins. Condition 1, recidivism. Subpoint A, psychological harms. In juvenile detention centers, juveniles frequently experience unjust treatments such as solitary confinement. According to McCluskey 17, kids can spend as long as 23 hours a day, 7 days a week, for weeks or months on end in solitary. According to OJJDP in 2017, in the juvenile justice system, as many as 70% of youths have a diagnosable mental health problem. According to Wilson 11, wrote that failure to treat a mental disorder may contribute to a child's feelings of helplessness and aggressive behavior that may result in additional legal problems. 70% of youth held in secure detention were rearrested within 1 year of release, according to Justice Policy Institute. Subpoint B, rehabilitation fail. According to Parker 16, many schools and juvenile detention facilities lack basic instruction and educational services, making student transition now much harder. It's estimated that less than 20% have obtained their high school diploma. A 2015 report from the CSG Justice Center found that juveniles were far more likely than adults to reoffend after release across all states. The highest reported recidivism rate for juvenile offender was 76% within 3 years and 84% within 5 years. Condition 2, judicial injustice. Subpoint A, corruption. In juvenile justice system, offenders are tried in an adjunction hearing by one single judge instead of a public trial with a jury. According to 1117, in early 2011, juvenile court judges Silvera and Conahan in Pennsylvania were convicted of receiving millions of dollars from private juvenile detention facilities in exchange for sending young people to those facilities. They thus deliberately funneled juveniles those centers, regardless of whether the charges merited the punishment. ACF reported that at least 5,000 juveniles appeared before Silvera before discovery. Subpoint B, mistrial. Level 17 also wrote that judges receive information that is often not admissible at trial, including alleged statements that children made. Juvenile court judges oversee juveniles' compliance with pre-trial court conditions and become intimately aware of information that threatens to shape their opinion. In contrast, juries are carefully shielded from inadmissible information by the rules of procedure and evidence. Subpoint C, individual bias. Level 17 reported that important goals for juvenile court judges were to be promoted beyond juvenile court. Such legally irrelevant factors can unduly influence judicial decisions at fact-finding. Juries are less likely to let the bias of individuals affect the results because the nature of juries is to engage various groups of people from the community and ensure that a variety of decisions, different experiences, bears on factual decision-making. Condition 3, retribution. According to OER services define retribution as the prevention of future crime by removing the desire of personal avengement. As Levy 14 explains, when the state punishes the criminal, it reduces the criminal's rights and power to roughly the same degree that he or she previously reduced the victim's rights, restoring moral and social equilibrium. However, certain juvenile courts omit charges of severe violent crimes. According to OJJDP and Steel 14, criminal homicide is excluded from the juvenile justice system in Pennsylvania, and California has stopped funding its juvenile justice system. The impact of failing retribution is vigilantism. According to Circle 1, potentially massive unreported private retaliation cases occur each year. One study found that adults in the U.S. use guns for protective services more than 2.5 million times annually, and that potential victims of crime kill between 14,000 and 3,200 criminals and injure a further 7,000 to 18,000. And therefore, we're so proud to close. Thank you.
Okay, I believe we have the first question.
Yeah.
Now, so can everyone hear me all right? It seems like I'm lagging. Okay, so can we restart? Okay. My first question is with regards to your second contention. You talk about judicial injustice. So would you agree with me that the status quo criminal justice system is severely flawed?
We believe it's a burden for you to prove that to us first before we can agree with you. Can I move on to my question?
No. Quick clarification. You talk about judicial injustice, right? So
Yes.
You're basically saying that the juvenile system is unjust, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying that this part of the criminal justice system systematically oppresses these people and is not a representation of justice, correct?
No. We're saying that judges are corrupt, and in order to provide children with fairer trials, we should move them to the adult system. Don't try
So
and like
you're
make me sound like we're
criticizing
oppressing
judges.
people or
All right,
something.
move on to your question, please.
If you're going to abolish the criminal justice system, what's your backup plan if like community-based response fails? Because like
What do you
unless you
mean
can prove
backup
it's
plan if community-based
100%,
response fails? No,
if
you have to prove to me that community-based response does fail before you can
no,
talk
you
about
have to
what is
prove
my
to me
backup
that
plan.
it's like in 100% success rate, whilst the dangers of a violent criminal on the street is like too much. There's lives
The
at
thing
stake
is,
if
in the
you just
status
want
quo,
to
the criminal
abolish a
justice system
system.
does not have. Okay, this system in the status quo does not have an 100% success rate. As a matter of fact, you yourself claim that there is recidivism, right?
To me,
So this means
you have to prove
All
to
right,
me
I'm
that
sorry.
after we abolish it, then the community service will absolutely stand.
Well, the thing is, in the status quo, the system is so broken that literally any other system would be better than this system. As we have proved that there is systemic racism and there's systemic classism, all of these factors involved makes the criminal justice system actually a criminal injustice system. And there is no other mechanism that can actually be worse than this system. Can I ask you a question now?
Can I just make a quick clarification before your question? You're only
Please.
proving to me that this you have to like prove to me that your backup system will definitely stand, because proving that this system is wrong doesn't prove another system
No,
is
we don't have that burden because
question.
number one,
Okay,
let me make a quick response to that.
Sure.
Number one, we tell you that there is in the status quo such a corrupt system that we have to abolish it first before we start thinking about what may come after that. That's Rodriguez's card. And number two is that you have not
what comes
fulfilled your
after,
burden of
because
proof.
these
Can
are
we
breakers,
ask you a question
murderers,
now?
and rapists on the streets.
Can
You're
we ask
trying.
you a question now?
Sure.
All right. Are you aware that this rhetoric of how murderers and robbers and rapists are on the street is just like provoking anxiety in peoples to justify expansion of state power, exactly the same as what happened after the Reichstag fire in Germany?
Wait, what? Pardon?
Okay, so you're saying that these dangerous criminals are going to be on the streets if the state is not present, right?
Yes. We're saying dangerous criminals will be on the street. If we're saying that these dangerous criminals will be on the streets if you abolish the system.
Carl Schmitt's constitutional theory, and it basically tells you that this is anxiety to expand the states.
I'm going to call for running prep, starting now. All right, that's enough. My computer was lagging, so it took some time. Let me scroll up. Go to my flow. Okay, the order is down there case at an advantage. Is anyone not ready? Time starts now. The thesis of our case is that state violence in and of itself is unjustified, and we make a very simple observation. The fact that this resolution qualifies the crimes we are trying to reduce as violent crimes means that the value criterion of this resolution is trying to minimize violence. That is to say, trying to reduce violence as much as possible in society. With that, we further premise that state violence is also a form of violence because this forms not only structural violence, but also the killing of people with the simple justification that it is a punishment for people who seemingly deserve punishment, when in reality, these people were forced into committing crimes by situations that they couldn't control by things like structural violence. We critique the system. We seek to abolish this very, very deplorable criminal justice system. So let's go down their case. Starting on the definitions. First, they define violent crime as specifically 4 offenses, but you prefer our definition of including things like revolution because it's more broad and it also comprises things like violence. Look at Myanmar as an example. Their revolutions, or people who are revolting there, they are punished as violent criminals, so do not prefer their definition as for privileged and stable countries without political rebellion. We say that these crimes, or not even crimes, these actions of people who just seek a better future, we justify these actions completely, even if there is some bit of violence, because we say that these people are simply seeking to reduce structural violence to build a better society for themselves. We say this in and of itself is justified and justifies the removal of the deadly system which has been subjugating people to the bottoms of society for hundreds upon hundreds of years. Moving on to some simple things on their first contention. Their first contention about recidivism. First, we say that it's this thing about this isn't actually going to work on their solitary confinement link, because we say that in all countries, this either one violates the Convention on the Rights of Children, which makes it illegal, or in the US, which hasn't ratified this, it violates the 8th Amendment, which also makes it illegal. Furthermore, we solve their entire harms, or rather, let me put it this way, we solve their entire case because we abolish this criminal justice system, and we abolish a system that actually subjugates people to solitary confinement. We have a larger scope. We solve for every single person in every single juvenile delinquent, and we also solve for all adult offenders. That's just like a little add-on. And then on their subpoint B about education, we actually solve because we provide better education. I'll talk about that at the end. That's my add-on. And we say that this thing about education, it's better to have people educated in society among their peers rather than among people who have supposedly committed crimes. We say it's better to teach people as if they aren't like bad people. It's better to not stigmatize them. Then on their second contention about their thing on juries being better, we say that this isn't necessarily true because O.J. Simpson got acquitted by a racially motivated jury. The entire jury selection process is in and of itself racist because lawyers can simply strike juries they think are not going to benefit their case, and as a result, there were 11 black juries on that panel. And then they talk about mistrial, and we say that juries aren't any better for mistrial. You can cross-apply the OJ example because chances are he was very involved in that murder, but he got acquitted. And juries are also driven by emotions, and judges aren't. And furthermore, we say we solve because we don't have any of these decisions to make, and community services are better. And then they talk about retribution and their third contention. We reject this entire principle of retribution because we say retribution is the biggest form of state violence. It is the subjugating of people to shackles and cages simply because they did something that the society deems as illegal, when in reality, society is forcing them into committing these crimes. And this moral and social equilibrium is, and please excuse my French, a bullshit excuse to preserve state violence against the people who have been subjugated for hundreds of years. So moving on to our advantage, our add-on is going to be a community-based solutions working. The first card is that social workers are more equipped to deal with the root causes of crime like poverty and mental health issues. It's better than police. Empirics prove our case. Bergen 20. We have the trust of the community, and so when we arrive, we can lead with how can we support you. These people are more able, these people have called for the defunding of police. They are better. They can work 99.4% of the time. Indeed, empirics prove that those people in poverty are 7 times more likely to commit crime. That you can call for that card, and this is the higher advantage. We can just add it later. But the point is we solve.
Actually, I would like to run prep. 30 seconds. I'm ready. Starting right now. Judges should prefer our definition based on violent crimes because it is provided by an institution that is more relevant and more authoritative to this debate. And moreover, with regard to framework, they had never contacted or confronted our framework right away. But moreover, we outweigh for 2 reasons. First, more relevant to today's debate, and second, less abusive. And I will later explain this in the latter part of my rebuttal speech. Now, first of all, generally answering their entire critique case, right? First, Crime and incarceration rates are on the decline now, and this is the justification for the CJS. Carson 18 says, at the end of the last century, crime rates began to fall in the United States and in most Western democracies. There are also a decrease in imprisonment in the United States. State prison populations have been regularly declining since 2009, and at the end of 2014, the combined federal and state prison population was at its lowest level since 2005. The number of individuals under supervision in the U.S. adult correctional system in 2015 amounted to the lowest rate detected since 1994. Second response, trends show that reforms in the U.S. is possible. Recognition by larger public need for the reform is key to effective pressure in the institutions. Kleinfeld 20 said in Botoga, the moment for long overdue reforms finally came after the police raped and murdered a 9-year-old. And moreover, in the United States, the moment for long overdue reforms may have come after the brutal killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis police. What works for fair and effective policing is well known. Decades of research confirm that trust between law and enforcement and communities is essential because controlling crime requires community help. Trust is enhanced by recruiting a force that resembles the community it serves. The problem is getting police and police leaders making these changes and make them stick. The United States has taken the first steps. Politicians are on the notice from vocal voting middle class in every democracy where systematic police abuse has been tackled. Change usually began when the broader public started to care. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed the police reform bill. Various U.S. states and communities are making changes as well. Third of all, abolition fails. Successful change requires policy buy-in. Defunding won't accomplish. Kleinfeld 20 also explained that deep reform requires the police accept the change. Reforms only stick when they're done with police, not against them. Support with the ranks of the police is essential, and that will require activists to change their approach. And moreover, if activists can make a hard pivot to try to win the police, it will also help them to overcome the greatest danger to police reform, polarization. Polarization leads to decades of growing state violence and installed reform in Colombia, several countries in Central America as well, and other homicide hotspots. Now, moving on to address what they practically what they have said, right? Because throughout this entire debate, they have never actually touched on any of the jargons mentioned in the resolution, and thus you can completely throw their case out of window right now. They said that those juveniles should not be punished for what they have done because they are being influenced by their system, background of upbringing. However, first, non-uniqueness. Everyone, both adults and juveniles, are affected by their environment of upbringing. Juvenile Court Statistics 18 said 67% of homicide offenders aged 16 or 17 years old. Given analogy, Khan has the burden to elaborate why a 70-year-old committing violent crime on one day before his 18th birthday is not responsible, whereas an 18-year-old violent offender doing so one day or several days after 18th birthday is responsible. Second, regardless of age, when juveniles are proven guilty for a violent crime, they deserve to be punished for their conduct. Extending the vigilantism from our case, if the state don't execute the justice for them, they will take it upon themselves. That's why my partner told you Soko once said annually as much as 3,000 people are killed and 18,000 people are injured by potential victims. Last of all, addressing the alternative they provided to you, right? First, they tell you they have no burden to prove the effectiveness. However, without them providing a quantifiable impact, it is impossible for us to evaluate the importance of their argument in this debate. And moreover, we tell you that our system has been more effective than the juvenile system because extending from case, juvenile detention facilities are ineffective, and when juvenile homicide offenders, the most violent, have low recidivism rate when treated as adults. According to a 2020 study from Montclair University, juvenile sentenced for life, which is 25 years in prison, have a recidivism rate only 1.14%. Thank you.
I'm not considering that last statistic because it was after that time. 3 minutes. Are you ready?
One moment. Getting the timer. Yeah, let's start.
So when you talked about community help, you effectively conceded that our solution is going to work.
So how did I concede to that exactly?
You said something about how community help is crucial and how we need to work with the community, which is basically our alt. Our alt basically says to work.
No. What I'm saying is that the police force should be constructed, and this criminal justice system should be constructed in the way that it resembles.
This links perfectly to my follow-up question.
Okay, so that is not that is nothing to do with abolishing the entire criminal justice system.
This links perfectly to my follow-up question.
We're seeking up for the reforms. You asked me a question. Can I actually answer it?
Okay.
Yeah. So what we're saying is that reforms are going to help the criminal justice system improve as a result, right? When they're resembling more to the community, they're benefiting the society more. And
this
all of those
is also a perfect link to my follow-up.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so for the past 500 years, people have been lynched, segregated, racistly harmed, and their police have supported insurrection. So why should we be supporting this criminal justice system when it is supporting the fall of society?
That lynching, okay, it's a private execution for like their
No,
own
it is not a
justice
private
system and
execution. It is in
restoring.
public. It is on a tree, and people are watching this. Like for instance, a black person get hanged, and they are doing nothing about it. And the criminal
That
justice system is just watching there and being complicit. So why should we
okay,
support the
okay,
criminal
cool.
justice
Okay,
system when they have been
hold on there,
racist for 500
hold on
years?
there. That specifically links to our vigilantism impact. Whereas when the system justice is like absence over there, people would take it upon themselves to revenge and kill more people, and that is why there are 3,000 people being killed every year and 18,000 being killed, being
So
injured
if we
every year.
perpetuate the criminal
It's all
justice
specifically
system,
due
doesn't
to
this just worsen your? Doesn't this just like perpetuate your
no,
argument?
it's not. That's why we're reinforcing that we should extend the impact of criminal justice system, because what you have said
So you're
actually
extending
occurs
the impact
into
of the
the
criminal
essence,
justice
into
system,
the
which we say
essence
is
of the
structural
system.
violence against Black people that has disenfranchised them for the past 5 centuries, basically.
No, we're saying that they're being treated that way because the criminal justice system is absent. After the reforms, like after what all those
No,
cards that I
look, the
read to
issue
you
with the
in my
criminal
rebuttal
justice
speech,
system is that when people are convicted in the criminal justice system, they lose their right to vote. So why do you assert that the criminal justice system is absent in this when in reality, the criminal justice system is the root cause of all this structural violence?
well, so here's the thing: criminal justice has its purpose of executing the justice, right?
So why
So
is
when
this
they're
just?
absent over there, there was people taking it upon themselves to avenge themselves. Okay.
Okay.
And that's why
Final
we should
question.
extend the impact
Final
of the
question.
criminal justice
Why is
system. When those people,
disenfranchisement justice?
sorry, can you
Why is
repeat?
disenfranchisement justice?
And
that's a rhetorical question. You can
how
ask our
is that-
question in the last 11 seconds.
How is that by any way topical to today's debate? We're only arguing
Because the
for whether
criminal justice system
should be treated as
disenfranchises people that
adults
go
or the
through it.
juvenile system.
Just to clarify, the CJS disenfranchises people.
Running prep, please. Okay, I'm ready. All right, a quick roadmap is going to be framework, and then extending critique, and then going over the first. Just start. 2 minutes, time starts now. All right, so from Auschwitz to lynching to George Floyd, all was done in the name of justice because people like side affirmation prefers order to justice. Let's break this resolution down. There are essentially 2 key terms in this resolution today. Number 1 is violent criminals, and number 2 is CJS. Both of them are bad framing for these issues because number 1, for these quote unquote violent criminals, they're committing crimes because their situations put them in that scenario where they have no other choice but to commit crimes. And the CJS is really terribly named because according to the status quo CJS, there is a 1 to 10 disparity for white Americans and Black Americans in committing crimes and being committed in these juvenile delinquency centers. And in the status quo, there is a median income of Black people of 1/10 compared to that of white people. So what we really have here is a system of systemic inequality and injustice that is being protected by a criminal justice system. This is state violence trying to disguise itself when our opponents are trying to tell you that incarceration is declining and that reform solves. Because we tell you, according to Foucault in his Discipline and Punish, the move from open state violence of guillotines to the state-run rehab centers is really just a makeover for the state violence. The violence continues and the power relation continues. And as for incarceration, we tell you that the reduction in total number of incarcerated people does not matter because number one, the exertion of the state violence is never justified in the first place, and number two, this still does not make up for the racial gap, which is essentially the thesis of our case. Number three, they talked about abolition fails. Because quotes, we need to have police accepting the change, which we tell you exactly. If you're gonna wait for the police to accept change for a system that they have spent years and decades using violence to defend, then you're not gonna be changing anything. Onto their fourth response, polarization leads to more violence. We tell you that yes, exactly. Radicalization is what we need right now because whatever radicalized violence that we have, even if it's a violent revolution on the streets, it's not going to be worse than the status quo of state violence. Our opponent's centrism has resulted in the default of state violence. And extend our Rodriguez 10 card, which tells you that academic debate is the perfect spaces for discussions like this. Even if you do not believe that abolition of criminal justice system is feasible, we tell you that this discussion is important to have. And by shining light on this very important issue, we encourage thought and we encourage critique in the system that we all live in. And that is more important than any other impact in today's debate. Moving on to our opponent's case, right? They first talk about recidivism. However, number one, we tell you that we provide better education under community programs. Furthermore, they talk about judicial justice. Number one, O.J. Simpson example, they never address. And number two, juries are also involved in this trial. And number three, the entire system was never justified to begin with, right? We had these sort of mechanisms in which corporate tax evasions are not tried in the same standard of a teen robber who had to rob bread for his survival. Moving on to the third contention, retribution, we tell you that criminal violence never outweighs the violence of that of the state. Remember, the state committed Auschwitz, the state committed lynching, and the state committed George Floyd. None of this was by violent criminals. Thank you.
Can I run 30 seconds of prep time? Thank you. Okay, I'm ready. If judge and opponents are ready, then my time starts now. Judges, you can already write pro on your ballot because the thing our opponents don't understand is that they're trying to create an ideal world. All the rebuttals are based on this ideal logic. The rebuttal to all contentions is with their alternative, which is send them to society and use community services to heal them or something along those lines. They forget that the society they want to use to heal the criminals is the same society that the criminals are angry at. And we'll tell you why. It's not the criminal justice system the criminals are angry at. It's actually the people. They say criminals commit crime because they're rebelling against the criminal justice system, but it isn't the system that is corrupt. It's the people. Once again, for example, Black citizens are up to 10 times more likely to be arrested in the first place. And it's not because the system demanded police to search Black citizens more. It's because society views the people as less innocent and more dangerous. They view Black people as less innocent and more like criminals. And therefore, this is why the Blacks are searched more. I'll give you an example to simplify this for you. If, let's say, a white kid got lost in the streets, then the police will just ask them for their address and drive them home. But if a Black kid got lost in the street, they're going to take him through all of the legal processes, and this is absolutely unfair, and we agree, right? But however, abolishing the criminal justice system won't change the people. The same way justifying murder under the name of revolution doesn't change the fact that lives are being taken. We turn because juvenile homicide offenders, the most violent, have low recidivism rate when treated as adults. We protect society. According to a 2020 study from Montclair State University, juveniles sentenced for life, which is 25 years in prison, due to a convicting murder, have a recidivism rate of just 1.14%. Regardless of age, when juveniles are proven guilty for a violent crime, they deserve to be punished for their conduct. Extending the vigilantism impact from our case, the public, especially victims or family members of victims, have the tendency to take it upon themselves the role to restore justice and moral equilibrium. My partner told you that Silk 01 says annually as much as 3,000 people are killed and 18,000 people are injured by potential victims. And this actually leads to a system of criminality, right? We tell you this actually leads to a cycle because we noticed a trend that most of the convicted criminals were actually once victims of violent crime themselves. And in a report of 43 death row inmates, 36 has been physically or sexually abused, 37 neglected, 31 witnessing domestic violence. And in Khan's world, where we don't keep them in the jails and we try and provide recidivism and rehabilitation, this only leads to the next step in the cycle because the criminals will run free and create more criminals. The actions they're talking about, this is why there's like 18,000 people injured in society currently in the status quo. This is why there's 3,000 deaths every year, right? Pro is taking the necessary step to make this a better society for children and all adults in the long term. Therefore, we're so proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay,
And
2
Cross.
minutes for Cross. All right, my first question, and time starts now. To what extent is violence acceptable to the affirmation side today?
Well, to the fact that those committed it should be punished for it, or else only more violence will be generated out of it due to vigilantism.
All right.
Can I have a question?
So you're saying, quick follow-up, please. So you're saying that the state should exert violence on these people who are quote unquote violent themselves and try to make them into better people, right?
Here's the thing: we're doing nothing like we're doing nothing like the Punisher from the film, right? What we're saying is that we're putting those violent crime offenders into the prison and incapacitate them, so that while they before they age out of the tendency to commit crimes, they will stay away and prevent them from
so you're basically saying that these people are going to be violently
we've been covering over.
They are going to be forced to stay. Please ask your question.
No. Okay, so do you have a quantifiable impact for the effectiveness of your community services?
99.4%.
Yes.
To violent crime offenders who are juveniles?
To everyone.
Then is the evidence
specific to juvenile violent crime offenders? How?
Okay, let's see. This talks about.
Also, hold on.
Can you elaborate the topicality of your evidence? Like, it deals with none of the jargons mentioned in the resolution.
Oh, you really want us to talk about jargon? I can spread the entire card in Final Focus if you want, but this card specifically talks about, for instance, the criminal justice system. It further talks about things like maybe the policing system, which we admit isn't exactly topical, but it's obviously related to the criminal justice system.
Does it talk about juvenile criminals who commit violent crimes specifically?
This entire case is predicated. This entire like the card file that I got this out of is specifically for juveniles, and furthermore, we would say that this literally applies to everyone. And unless you want to say that a juvenile is not a human, I think we already won this debate.
Can we ask another question now?
Like specifically for those in poverty, and we would say that juveniles, like under our alt, we're specifically putting them into these systems, and we say that they can deal with.
Okay, so they're put into the system, whereas they will just get along with all those other people who are previously victimized by them. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
What do you mean?
Another question. All right. So you talked about systemic racism not being solved by abolition, and you talked about how police is treating people differently because of their inherent biases, right? Can you tell me, like, what is it that allows this bias to be translated into actual violence in the streets? Like, what power, hint government, what power is translating this bias into actual violence on Black people?
So here's the thing, whether or not you reject the criminal justice system or juvenile justice system, power is going to penetrate. It is inevitable in both worlds.
Because, can
you elaborate to me why in your world power will penetrate less?
Is inevitable. We do not believe that power relationships is inevitable.
Can you elaborate why it will penetrate less in your world?
Our entire thesis is that we reject this power dynamic.
Delusion of governments, which we reject.
Okay. Do we need prep? I think I'm fine. All right. Not prep. Let's just go. I'm just gonna signpost. All right. Is anyone not ready? It was police who stormed Capitol Hill on January 6th, and the entire criminal justice system perpetuates racism and injustice without any punishment from the state. It was police who killed Breonna Taylor exactly last year to this date and violated the 4th Amendment, and they are walking free. It is police who kneeled on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to barely any punishment. When they say they want to deliver justice to criminals, they fail to do this, and we critique this criminal justice system and urge for the abolition of this racist system, which has disenfranchised, shackled, and chained people to cells for hundreds of years. And like in their summary, they said something about like these people are being searched because the public wants Black people to be searched. But we say that this exactly perpetuates a racist power dynamic that exists in the status quo, such that a Black person cannot walk on the street at night because they think they're going to get shot because they look suspicious. Look, there's 5 reasons we win this debate. First is poverty. You can extend this cleanly. Those in poverty are 7 times more likely to commit crime, which perpetuates socioeconomic inequality when they get pushed into this criminal justice system, regardless of juvenile or adult. Second, we say the state perpetuates violence, meaning you reject all forms of state violence, including the CJS. Auschwitz, North Korea, the US, and Guantanamo, this country, are all really great examples of this. We reject the state violence and say the CJS perpetuates the killing of people because they were forced into crime by things like poverty. Third voting issue, extend our rule of the ballot, which was dropped. Even if they somehow outweigh us, you vote for us because we shine light on structural violence. This in and of itself is a reason to vote for the team that shines light on the people who have been disenfranchised for hundreds of years. Fourth, community-based solutions solve. Extend the 99.4% card. It applies to everyone, and we say that juvenile people are going to be put into this exact system, so the efficacy is 99.4%. Even though it's not exactly specific, we say it also applies. Fifth, as a brief summary of everything, we say the current criminal justice system does not work, and abolishing it is the only way to deliver justice to not only martyrs who have died for us, but also future victims of this criminal justice system, which once again has disenfranchised, shackled, and chained people to cells. Rest in power, we negate.
Pro would like to run prep. Actually, I would like to pull a card before running the rest of my prep. Can you send me the effectiveness quantifiable impact for your community services?
Hold on. Yeah, okay. This should be the link. It might not be accessible, and let me pull out the quote. It's very long, so I'm also going to send like a shorter one.
Thank you.
That's the, oh my God. Okay, that's the entire thing. And the thing that you want is
Okay,
this chunk.
That's indeed a long quote. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll start. Clarification on the evidence check. Judges, you can do the control app and search for words such as criminals, offenders, violent crimes, or juveniles. You can find none of these throughout this entire article. This is totally not topical to today's debate whatsoever. Kick that out of your window right now, since it's the only quantifiable impact they've ever provided to justify their alternative. It is not. Okay, moving on to clarifications, right? Okay, we have already told you that we have justified the existence of criminal justice system with the overall trend, whereas they have been only pulling out single cases. Second, the Black Lives Matter has awakened the awareness of the importance of criminal justice system, and many police reforms are already taking place. Status quo are improving, according to Kleinfield 20 in my rebuttal. And thirdly, the negation side is pushing for polarization with their extremist argument on the critique of abolishing the entire criminal justice system. We turn their impact. And moreover, now let's get on the actual debate, right? Juvenile justice system, criminal justice system, which one is better for those juvenile violent offenders? Under the framework of fulfilling the purposes of criminal justice system, the first voting issue is retribution. They mentioned lynching, they mentioned George Floyd. All of those are the product of the absence of the criminal justice system. We tell you that we should push for those juveniles to be treated as adults so that those incidents would not occur more. In California, they abolished the juvenile justice system. In Pennsylvania, they don't charge those criminal offenders who committed suicide when they're juveniles. This is only going to lead to two things. First, the victimization of more people because those juvenile offenders are just going to wander up around the street. Second, vigilantism. We tell you that annually, those people revenge for themselves and kill 3,000 people and injure 18,000 people as a result. Second voting issue on rehabilitation. We tell you that 1.14 recidivism rate is what you get when you sentence a violent juvenile to life sentencing. They age out of their tendency to commit crimes. But moreover, in the juvenile justice system, there's an 84% recidivism rate in 5 years. And in those places where community services are accessible, 20%. Okay, that's time.
Nice run. Thank you a lot.
Thanks, Diego.
For the record, can you send us your definition of violent crime?
Sure.
Just so everyone can look at it.
Yeah.
Ah, it's American.
Quote.
All right, the result is out. This is a 4-1 decision for the pro side, so congratulations for the pro team. And good job to the con. Maybe.
I love that maybe though.
So Sophia, you want to start? Or you probably need to.
Oh, sure. Okay, I can start. So I'm the only judge who votes for the con side. But I think just like in the end of the day, I think just this kind of debate is very hard to judge. Like for me at least, I think it's basically I cannot like judge this kind of wrong based on the kind of arguments, like simply based on the kind of sequence that you said, like the sequence of your speaking order or something. But I think it's the reason I think I gave con to win this debate is because I think just like in the long term, I think that the kind of solution, they didn't very, I think like in a very very thorough way, they just like provide this kind of solution to the kind of problem. But I do think like in the long term, the kind of a root cause of the society is just based on what they said, like this kind of social inequality, and this kind of source, like people want to fight or something, because like, structurally speaking, I think just like all the people who are suffering are sometimes just like abused, or just like there's some kind of inborn like characteristics in their kind of thing. They're like structurally influenced by this kind of society. So I think that basically in the long term, the concept which will offer better solution. But I think just it is not actually the concept's burden to prove the solution for the kind of society to be better or something. Because I think simply like concepts wants to win this round, simply can just say, oh, because like we just simply don't need to have this kind of sentencing the juvenile crimes into have the like just to treat them with this as same the treatment with the adults. But I think just like for the pro side, I think just the engagement didn't necessarily just match with the kind of concept, because I think you just like came second, especially from the second speaker. I think the real problems, I think just like concept wins a little bit better, is because I think just you like even if you can like successfully prove like their side is right, like your side is right, it doesn't necessarily like no. I think it's like even if you can successfully prove like their side is wrong, it doesn't necessarily mean like your side is right. Because I think for these kind of problems, there are many kind of alternative solutions to solve this problem. But necessarily, I think you like in your whole case, it didn't feel like the urgency and necessity to solve this kind of problem simply by sentencing them with the same crimes as the adult criminals. So I think that is a kind of thing that I'm quite confused that in the end of the debate. But still, I think this is quite excellent debate. I think probably just like the other judges have the same opinions, but I think but actually, honestly, for me, like if I am the pro side, I think just like find it is very hard to engage with the cons case. But I think just like if I am the debater, I will probably say, because like there's some kind of problems that you have to find something. I think there might be some reason, or there must be some reasons for the kind of a criminal justice system to exist in like in the today's society. So like some people are suffering because of these kind of harms or something. So I think just basically based on the kind of consequentialism, you probably all have to treat this kind of people with the kind of punishment they deserve to have. Yeah, just basically my opinion. But I think this is a very, very excellent round. And thank you for both teams.
Thank you.
Alright, since nobody is going on, I'm going to say that why I voted for the pro side. It is because we're in the same circumstance that in the current system, we all know that there have been a lot of problems. For example, corruption, for example, is not justifiable for the criminals or for the victims. And the pro side, they are trying to make things like equal. They are trying to make things better by punishing these criminals according to their violence behavior. But the con side, they pointed out a lot of problems, but I don't see that how the con side is trying to make things better by maintaining the system, which is happening now. But also pro side needs something to improve is that you need more evidence to show that why it is more justifiable to treat these juveniles the same as adults, because I noticed that you said something like if somebody commit crime some days before 18, then this person doesn't need to be like criminalized. But if there is somebody just a few days over 18, but the thing is that there would always be a line for age for basically all of the rules that requires any standard for age. So possibly you could find another way in stating that why this juveniles is fully capable of knowing what they're doing and why they should take the responsibility for whatever they have done. But it's a pretty good debate, and congratulations for having 4 of the 5 votes.
Okay, so I also voted for the pro side. I have to say that this is my first time saw the con-side, any con-side using a very brandly new strategy in your debate. Like you're trying to tell me that the current criminals are actually caused by the injustice in the judicial system, but you're like telling me that a serial killer kill people just because we think him as a criminal. That may be the case in very small possibility, but it cannot always be the case. Like I have to say that you have a really, really like new strategy in narrating your case. Try to tell me that the judicials actually are not just and they cause crimes. But the thing is that the proving the fallacy in the adult system doesn't necessarily mean the juvenile system is flawless. So you need to reconsider your approach or your strategy in narrating your case in order to like make it more reasonable. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'll quickly make a comment. I voted for the pro side. For the pro side, I would encourage you to build up on your argument about the judicial injustice. Yeah, because in as much as the justices who have the legal knowledge might be biased, the jury too could also be biased. And for the con side, I had a little problem with you claiming that the justice system has a problem. Yeah, indeed, we all know it has a problem. But if the child or the juvenile who committed the crime should be accepted as maybe he didn't have foreknowledge or didn't really know what he is doing, but we keep blaming the justice system, then there's going to be a problem. But we can't blame the justice system wholly for the problem caused by another child. So I think maybe you can rephrase that contention. Thank you.
Alright. Do I really need to give a reason why I voted pro? I just want to ask. I just want to ask Kong one question. Like, how serious are you with this case? Can I take it as a play case? Or if you're serious with it, I can give serious comment. But I take it as a play case. Is that okay with you?
I'm only doing one tour this season, so I thought I might have some fun. But yeah.
Yeah, I assume if I take it as a play case, it wouldn't be offended. So yeah, I just assume that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, it's a fun debate. I don't really think I need to really give any further comments on why pro should win. The previous judges pretty much covered. Just one very small suggestion for the pro side. For the pro side, I think you're already kind of doing a little better job than I expected. I don't think a lot of debaters can really have your flexibility as to reacting to such situations. So yeah, I really do appreciate your flexibility and just your reaction in this debate. I of course I cannot say like what I will probably do in your shoes, because I'll probably also be under a lot. Okay, this is pretty much to me just a government anarchy case. So pretty much to me it just sounds that way. And so just a little suggestion for rebuttal. And especially when your opponents are coming up with some really, really radical plan, typically the team that propose that radical plan or gives the critique, they will need to take. They need to give. They have much higher burden of proof. So I think you definitely could just push very hard on their push all the burden on their side, and basically really try to be very, very petty with every single word they say that might or might not make sense, which in this case they actually do have a lot of flaws. So yeah, there are a lot of things that you can really take into account of that. For example, when they literally say that all the people that commit violent crimes are literally doing it out of anger for the system, which is just simply not the case. Yeah, so also, especially one part, I think you could really push hard for your push hard on alternatives. Like your opponents at least need to give some alternatives. In this case, they're only, I don't even want to call it alternative. Their only thing is just this community service, which typically, of course, the evidence they gave is only like the current community support under the current legal framework. So of course, they're not really giving a real example here. And also, even if they do not necessarily need to bring up an alternative, at least what they need to do is to have some very full impact comparison of the world with and without criminal justice system, which they also did not. So just one very small suggestion for the concept. I know you're trying to have fun with this case, and I think you did. We also had some fun time. I'll say just a little bit of intellectual guide. I think you can try to be a little bit more constructive, because in high level debate, as complaining about how a system is bad or complaining about how a system is imperfect is pretty much the easiest thing to do. It's probably like one of the most basic words that you should be able to do. So yeah, just try to be a little bit more constructive. I'll say I think the more probable case, the more probable challenge, if I were you and if I were using this, I'll probably put much more effort on what a world without criminal justice system would look like. I'll probably quote a lot more Roussel and just think about the inherent internal beauty of human in the state of nature. This is probably one thing I like to constantly think about. Of course, you have your different philosophical takes, but just my own personal opinion. But simply complaining about things is probably some of the easiest thing you can do. So yeah, try to give yourself a little challenge if you really want to have some fun in using such a case.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks. See y'all next week.
Thank you. Thanks for.
I'm not seeing you all next week, so have fun this season. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.